Right here has gotten a lot of attention, and I've seen a lot of people post this on social media, hooraying the fact that 121 empty tankers are heading to the United States, over 60 of which are very large crude carriers. And everyone is sitting there saying this is fantastic for the United States because the US is going to replace the Persian Gulf as the source of oil on the world. There are some problems with that statement, and we're going to break it down for you. We're also going to talk about the fact that a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier is on the way to the Middle East, but heading in a little bit of an indirect way. It may say it's beating around the bush. We're going to come back to that story too. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right. So this graphic here has been all over the place on Fox News. It shows you that chain of oil tankers coming around the Cape of Good Hope. Now, understand, many of these tankers are huge, very large crude carriers, can carry about 2 million barrels of fuel. A barrel is 42 gallons. However, they would typically be heading up here to the Persian Gulf area to load. These tankers are, however, coming into the Atlantic, heading for different areas, but largely heading up here toward the Gulf region, particularly Galveston, Houston, and what is known as the Loop, the Louisiana Offshore Oil Platform. Now, this all has to do with the disruption that has been caused by the lack of oil coming out of the Persian Gulf. I found this graphic online, and I apologize. I want to attribute it to someone. The problem is I don't know who initiated this. There's no so when you put a graphic like this, please put your name on it and a reference so that we can always highlight it. I've seen this on several Twitter feeds and social media, so I don't know. So a couple of key things here. Net impact on global oil stocks. So right now, we're normally getting 20 million barrels of oil from the Persian Gulf. However, what we're seeing is some redirects. So we're seeing some pipeline redirects. We're seeing some releases from the SPR. So the net impact on the oil stocks is about 11.1 million barrels of oil we're still coming up short with. When you look at the Strait of Hormuz disruption, normally we're getting 20 million out of the Strait of Hormuz. We're getting about 1.5 million barrels per day out of it. That's a 92% reduction. Key thing here, that Saudi pipeline, which is at full capacity, I keep talking about this, it's at 7 million barrels per day, but you're not getting 7 million barrels per day loaded on ships because the port of Yanbu can only handle 4.5 million barrels per day. What this means is the global inventories on ships is falling. This talks about the fact that the global drawdown on the world supply is down 218 million barrels. Now, I want to show you this chart because this chart I found was also very relevant. This shows you global observable oil inventories in millions barrels, both onshore and afloat. And you'll notice that in 2026, the only year that was actually higher was 2021 going into 2020. And remember, that was COVID. COVID had caused this massive uptick in the amount of oil because people weren't driving, and it was very slow to come down and eventually comes down here in 2021. And this is fairly the norm here from 2017 to 2025. But here's 2026, and notice this drop. It's not that we're below 2020 and 2021. It's we're getting ready to dip precipitously down. That slope is the concern. We're not going to be able to make up that amount. Now, that's not heading to zero by any means, but what we're going to see is oil is going to become much more difficult to replace, and that is key. All right, let's go back to the root of the question here. Can the U.S. supply all those very large crude carriers? So this chart from the Financial Times is using information gleaned from Kepler. For those of you who don't know, Kepler is the owner of Marine Traffic. This shows you the record number of empty tankers heading to the United States, both empty and loaded. And the key here is the dark blue. Look at how many empty are coming. Almost 70 empty tankers are heading for the United States. Now, you may be asking, why are loaded tankers heading to the United States? Go back to our refineries. Our refineries can't refine all of our own oil. That old traditional oil we pull out of the ground, that's the stuff we love for our refineries. However, what we tend to pull from the ground now is fracking oil, much lighter and sweeter. And that oil tends to be shipped overseas to refine products. So what we're getting back into the United States is oil for our refineries, this heavy, darker oil that's coming in. However, this is still showing these empty tankers coming in. So this massive spike in 2026, can we handle that massive spike? And again, the concern I have is we can't. And let me quantify this for you. We come over to the EIA, the Energy Information Administration. This is their report on U.S. exports of crude oil in thousands of barrels per day. And this is monthly. You'll see back in October of 2023, we were hauling out somewhere in the range of 4.128 million barrels per day. Come back to 2010, we're hauling out, double digit tens of thousand barrels per day. And then in 2016, when we allow the export of a lot of oil just goes through the roof. And now we're hauling out millions of barrels of oil. The last number we have here is for January of 2026, 3.9 million barrels per day. So why is that number of particular note, 4 million barrels per day? Well, we're talking about 60 VLCCs heading toward the United States. A VLCC can load 2 million barrels. Problem is, do we have 2 million barrels to load in that? We have not been up at 5 million barrels today. We may be able to get up. Now, can we see a rise as much as we have done in the past? Potentially. But right off the bat, it's going to be hard to do that. Let's come over here to marine traffic. This is all the VLCCs, empty VLCCs out on the world's oceans. I cleaned this up. These are empty, over 200,000 tons. And this is that long line we're seeing coming out, that big diversion that's happened now away from the Persian Gulf, heading this way around South Africa. Some are going to be heading up here to Nigeria. Some will be heading to Brazil. Some to Venezuela, Colombia, maybe some to Mexico, but the vast majority of them we're going to see here coming in. And here you see them coming in off of Corpus Christi, off of Houston, and then other tankers, smaller tankers will be heading to the loop here off of Louisiana. So as each of these come in, they're about 2 million barrels a piece. Again, we can load 4 million barrels. We may be able to get up to 5 million barrels, but this is going to take time. This distance from Houston to Shanghai is 52 and a half days at 12 knots. Some of you are going to be asking, why not go through the Panama Canal? Your ships are too big. You can't go through the Panama Canal. 52 and a half days. It's 22 and a half days from the Persian Gulf. Here, why not load out of Yanbu? They are loading out of Yanbu, but again, you're only getting 4.5 million barrels per day out of Yanbu. So what you're doing is you're sending a huge amount of empty tankers to congregate off the U.S. Gulf Coast. The problem's going to be you need twice as many tankers to cover that distance. And more importantly, we don't have the loading capacity to load all those tankers. So should the Persian Gulf open back up tomorrow, all these tankers are going to be out of place. This is going to cause a massive disruption across the entire global economic system. This is a key thing to understand. So when people sit there and say this is great for the United States, it's very good for the United States. For U.S. oil companies, it's fantastic. But when you're drawing oil out of the United States, especially if you have to uptick in production, if you have to increase the infrastructure, and if you're potentially pulling oil away from the United States, you're going to see higher gas and fuel prices in the United States because oil and gas and diesel and aviation fuel is bid on a global market. It's not domestically done. So yeah, we will see a short-term benefit, but it's the long-term we need to be thinking about. All right. The other issue I wanted to talk about, because this also involves going around the Cape of Good Hope, is this story that came out from the USNI news crew. Friend of the show, Mallory Shelbourne, wrote this story: Carrier USS George H.W. Bush operating off southern Africa as Iranian blockade begins. So this is the USNI fleet tracker. They post this every week, and everybody was surprised to see the George H.W. Bush here off the coast of Namibia, the west coast of Africa. If you watched my video the other day, I mistakenly reported that the Bush was in the Mediterranean because a lot of social media posts had that. My mistake. I need to be better at that. My apologies. But Bush is down here. She's actually sailed from Norfolk. She's taking a route around Africa, going to be coming up here either through the Mozambique Channel or out into the central Indian Ocean and heading over here to either Diego Garcia or to join the Abraham Lincoln and the Tripoli Now, I found that route extremely interesting, and I actually did a post on this about why the ship is not going through the Suez Canal and down the Red Sea. And I had a couple of things I stated about it. Number one, transiting the Suez Canal right now is a bit of a security challenge. Yes, Ford did it into the Red Sea and back out again when it was damaged. It had the laundry room fire and it had to go up to Crete for repairs. So they took that risk. However, a carrier in the Suez Canal is confined. It's tracked. Everybody knows exactly where it is. It's reporting on AIS. There's visual confirmation about it. It's extremely vulnerable for the 120 miles it's in the Suez Canal. The other issue here, too, is that you have to wait to get into the canal. You'll have to transit down the Red Sea. Yes, the Houthi are down there in the Bab el Mandeb, and the Houthi have demonstrated no ability to hit any warship whatsoever in the recent spate of attacks since 2023. Yes, they hit a Saudi Arabian ship with a unmanned surface vessel back in the 2010s, but they were not able to hit any warships at all during the most recent. They're very good at terrorizing innocent merchant ships, getting the crews to get off, and then going on board and sinking them. They did that 3 times. I don't think it's so much the Houthi as much as they want to be able to operate this carrier at full capability. And more importantly, they're going to do this transit at a pretty high speed. So much so that if you look at the distance comparison between sailing the Suez Canal or the Cape of Good Hope, it's only a 3-day difference. And one of the reasons that the ships are able to do this is because the ships are sailing with a very unique ship. And a good friend of the show, Commander Salamander, made note of this in his blog post yesterday. Bring Rainier and Bridge out of reserve. The other Sal makes the argument for me. Hi, I'm the other Sal. Commander Salamander, who is nameless, he's anonymous. He has been running a blog, the Midrats blog and podcast, along with Mark Tempest, Eagle One, for a long time. I strongly recommend it. I've been on it several times. It's absolutely great. But one of the things that this deployment demonstrates for me, why send Bush around Africa, is because they have with it the USNS Arctic. Now, I love talking about sea lift and underway replenishment. The vessel here you see straight off the bow of this destroyer is USNS Arctic. She is a supply class fast combat store ship. So she's a combination oiler. She provides fuel, she has ammunition, and she has stores. Now, the George H.W. Bush can deploy at a very rapid pace. She is a nuclear aircraft carrier. She does not need to refuel. However, the 3 destroyer, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers sailing with her do. And when they ramp up speed to 20, 25, or potentially 30 knots, I doubt it's that high, but probably 20 to 25 knots, they start burning fuel at an egregious amount. And the Arctic, along with her sister ship Supply and her 2 inactivated sister ships, Rainier and Bridge, were designed to keep pace with a fast carrier task force. Ships like the Bridge and the Rainier and the Arctic and the Supply can sail at 30 knots. They have gas turbine engines, extremely fast vessels. Now, you're going to consume a ridiculous amount of fuel in this evolution, but you can deploy much faster with the Arctic. And instead of taking the vessel through the Mediterranean, through a lot of traffic, let's not forget that Truman was involved in a collision north of Suez that could have almost taken that ship out of the battle line. They instead avoided all the choke points, Strait of Gibraltar, Suez Canal, the Bab el Mandeb, and are now heading around, beating the bush, so to speak, around the Cape of Good Hope and coming in. I think this highlights a big issue, the absolute necessity for more logistics vessels in the U.S. Navy Military Sea Lift Command. You may remember I did this video almost 2 years ago when the USNS Bighorn grounded out in the Arabian Sea. This ship was supporting, ironically, the Abraham Lincoln Battle Group. And for a period of time there, the Abraham Lincoln was without a oiler. There was no replenishment ship for them. It forced the U.S. Navy to strip the Lincoln of a lot of its escorts. If that happened now, that would be cataclysmic for the U.S. naval deployment in the region. Fortunately, the U.S. has moved several ships into the region. USNS Henry J. Kaiser, the oldest oiler in the fleet, is out there, along with one of the newest ones, the USNS John Lewis. So you have 2 oilers out there. There are 3 combat store ships out there of the Lewis and Clark class. And now here you have Lincoln coming with the USNS Arctic. Plus you have some commercial tankers of the tanker security program that are doing consolidated operations. They're transferring their fuel over to the tankers. Interesting to note, 2 of the tanker security program ships trapped in the Strait of Hormuz right now and can't get out. So again, this is all about logistics in many ways, and I think this is really important. Can the U.S. supply all the oil for the very large crude carriers coming? Sure, but it's going to take time, and it's not going to be fast. And it's going to be a long distance to get those ships back to Asia. Same thing here. Can the U.S. deploy the Bush around Africa in almost the same period of time? About a 3-day difference at 25 knots, according to my calculations using marine traffic. That is a pretty good exchange for not taking the risk of sailing through maritime choke points, Strait of Gibraltar, Suez Canal, Bab el-Mandab, and you're out there and really you're not being tracked at all. So one of the things I think the U.S. Navy needs to have a discussion about is maybe bringing Rainier and Bridge back into service. Those ships have only got 10 to 16 years on them. Bring them back to service, maybe a new generation of fast combat store ships, maybe thinking about putting Navy crews and armament back on them, vice USNS, USS, and also talking about whether or not the U.S. can replace. Understand, we've got to get the Strait of Hormuz open. There's no question about it. And I did a video the other day on the competing blockades right here, the Iranian versus the US. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you can hit the super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Till the next episode, Sal, signing off.